Senator from Iowa.
Mr. President, first I ask unanimous consent that Lucy Stein and Sarah Newman of my staff.
Sir, we're in a quorum call.
Granted. Oh, I'm sorry. Ask that proceedings in the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Lucy Stein and Sarah Newman of my staff be granted floor privileges for the duration of today's
Without objection.
Mr. President, I've come to the floor today to speak about a truly remarkable American, a truly remarkable visionary, a dreamer, an adventurer, a doer, most importantly, a young man who has devoted himself to service to others, far and above the normal call of duty. The young man's name is Matt Rutherford. This is Matt Rutherford, and I'm going to tell you about him and his remarkable adventure and his feat that's been unparalleled. He's a 30-year-old Ohioan, and here's what he's been doing since June the 13th of last year. On June the 13th of last year, he set sail in his 36-year-old, 27-foot Albin Vega boat named St. Brendan. He left Annapolis, Maryland, June the 13th of 2011, and is attempting to sail nearly 25,000 miles from Annapolis, Maryland, up the East Coast, all the way around Labrador, Newfoundland, up by Greenland, through the Northwest Passage, all the way over to Alaska. And then from Alaska all the way down to Cape Horn, around Cape Horn, up South America, and back into Annapolis. Now, what's so remarkable about that? Well, it's never been done before. He's doing it solo, and he's doing it nonstop. Think about that. He has never touched land and has not stopped since he left here 289 days ago. It's taken him through some of the Earth's most treacherous oceans, the Arctic Ocean, the oceans up around Alaska, the Aleutian Straits, of course, all the way down through the Pacific, around treacherous Cape Horn, and all in a 27-foot boat, the kind of boat that most sailors would maybe be comfortable on off the eastern shore in the Chesapeake Bay, but not on a journey like that. As I said, he has not set foot on dry land for the entire journey. A remarkable adventure. Now, if you want to learn more about him, you can go to his website, which is called solotheamericas.org. So it's www.solotheamericas.org. And you can read all about his amazing journey. And he updates it. The last update was yesterday that he had updated his journey. He's right now east of Cuba and the Dominican Republic, right down here. And his last posting was he's called it home stretch. He hopes to enter the Chesapeake Bay by April the 12th, make his first landfall in nearly a year at Annapolis on April the 13th. The Scott Polar Institute in Cambridge, England, has recognized him as the first person in recorded history to make it through the fabled Northwest Passage alone, nonstop, and on a small sailboat. Never been done before. You'd think that would be enough. No, he has continued on his incredible, remarkable journey. Now, you might say, well, why is he doing that? He's just doing it to set a record. Well, he has set a lot of records already. But why is he doing it? He's doing it to raise money for the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating, CRAB for short, Chesapeake Regional Accessible Boating. It's an Annapolis-based organization to provide sailing opportunities for the physically or developmentally disabled people. For kids and young people who are disabled but who would like to sail. And this organization, the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating, does just that. It provides them that opportunity. I had the privilege of talking to Matt Rutherford last week. He called me on his satellite phone. It was an exciting phone call for me because I've watched, and I don't know Matt Rutherford personally, but I've watched his journey, and of course I'm very enthused about the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating Organization. So in talking with him by phone, I was really impressed by his courage, his character, his audacity. Above all, I'm impressed by the fact that he's doing this in a cause larger than himself, to make it possible for more people with disabilities to share in his passion for sailing. Helen Keller once said, "It's a terrible thing to see and yet have no vision." Well, Matt Rutherford has the gift of sight. He also has the gift of vision and indomitable courage. He's one of those remarkable human beings who dream big, who are driven by big challenges, who refuse to accept the limits and the boundaries that so-called reasonable people want to place on you. And what's more, he's placed himself in the service of others less fortunate than himself. Mr. President, as the lead sponsor of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I'm particularly impressed that Matt is using his voyage to raise money to help people with disabilities to partake in this wonderful pastime of sailing, something which I have enjoyed all my adult life since I was in the Navy. He's doing this so that children and adults can have this same opportunity. Because you see, the reason I'm so enthused by this is that one of the fundamental aspects of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is that people with disabilities should be able to participate fully in all aspects of society. And that includes access to recreational opportunities like sailing, which can be exhilarating and empowering for children and adults with a wide range of disabilities. So I salute Matt Rutherford for his courage, for his love of sailing, and being willing to share that with the disability community, and for using this adventure, this almost death-defying trip. I mean, for anyone who knows what it's like to be on a 27-foot boat, to go from here all the way down to Cape Horn, that's incredible. Any one of the numerous storms or anything could have sunk his little boat. He's had a lot of different adventures. He sprung a leak. He's been working on that leak ever since. Someplace around in here and off South America, he lost his engine, so he no longer has an engine. And he keeps patching his leak all the time. Every day he has to patch his leak. So he's fighting a leak every day in his boat. And just going around Cape Horn with the tremendous waves and cross currents around Cape Horn, to take a small boat through there single-handedly is, as I said, is death-defying. Right up in here, right off the coast of Brazil someplace, he almost got ran over by a freighter. At night, he had gone to sleep for a little bit. He has a light on his boat so that people could see him at night. And he woke up and he said he looked out and he saw this red light and a green light with nothing in between it coming at him. Well, it was a huge freighter, and as you know, red on one side, green on the other, bearing down on him. He turned, and it missed him just by a few feet and almost sunk him in the bow wave of the freighter that went by. So that's a kind of things that Matt has lived with almost every day for 289 days. So anyway, he has great skill, great courage. He's making a difference, and he's going to make a difference for a lot of people. I especially think of young people with disabilities who would like to sail, and because of this organization, the Chesapeake Regional Accessible Boating, they will have that ability to do so. So again, Mr. President, this is one of the nice things that we see here happening in America. You know, if you think that there aren't those individuals with that individual kind of courage to take on the elements, to risk their lives, well, we still have them. And Matt Rutherford is stands in a line of great adventures in our history. I applaud him for his vision and spirit. I wish him safe passage on his home stretch and the final leg of his epic journey. I would say that he joins the ranks of Joshua Slocum, who on Spray was the first person to circumnavigate the globe solo. Joshua Slocum wrote a wonderful book, Sailing Alone Around the World. He did it before the turn of the last century. He did it in the 1890s. Or the next great person that sailed alone, Sir Francis Chichester on Gypsy Moth IV, not too many years ago, who circumnavigated the globe. So you can add to Joshua Slocum and Spray and Sir Francis Chichester on Gypsy Moth IV, you can now add Matt Rutherford on St. Brendan for an incredible journey around both of the Americas, solo and nonstop. Never been done before, may never be done again. And he's doing it for the best of all reasons. Courageous young man, Matt Rutherford. He's going to be back, as I said, hopefully by April the 12th. I hope to meet him. I've never met the young man, but I've followed his journey and his courage, and it's the kind of person that just gives heart and spirit to all of us, to know that there's nothing that we can't do if we set our minds and our hearts and have the willpower and the courage to take it on. So I hope to meet him when he comes back. Again, Mr. President, a young man of great courage. And I say I hope the home stretch is one with fair winds and a following sea. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor. And I note the absence of quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I ask that my following remarks appear at the end of my remarks I just made previous to putting in the quorum call.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I mentioned that Matt Rutherford was doing this for the Chesapeake Regional Accessible Boating Organization that provides boating for people with disabilities. I would urge anyone who's interested in this and to see what a great organization is, they can go to their website. It's just very simple, crabsailing.org, C-R-A-B, crabsailing.org. And it's just a great organization that helps people with disabilities take up sailing and learn the art and the craft of sailing. So, again, Mr. President, a remarkable young man, a remarkable journey. And, again, I wish him fair winds and a following sea on his home stretch. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois.
Ask consent to speak in morning business.
When a quorum call, sir.
Oh, ask consent to suspend quorum call,
Without objection.
and then consent to speak in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, last week the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reported that outstanding student loan debt in America has hit the $1 trillion mark, student loans. A CFPB official was cited by Bloomberg News saying that excessive student debt could slow the American economy's recovery. The housing market, particularly when young people are repaying money for their education, can't afford to buy a home. Massive student debt is also affecting consumers' ability to purchase goods and services. Yesterday, the Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government held a hearing focusing on student debt. Treasury Secretary Geithner came in talking about it. While the overall growth in student indebtedness is troubling, the most pressing concern is private student loans. Secretary Geithner recognized that private student loans do not come with any of the consumer protections that federal loans do. Private student loans are far riskier. Federal student loans have fixed, affordable interest rates, 3.4%. They also have a variety of consumer protections. The federal loans have forbearance in times of economic hardship and manageable repayment options, such as income-based repayment plans. Private student loans, on the other hand, often have high variable interest rates. Some have been quoted at 18%, the kind of rates you're careful of when it comes to your credit card. They have hefty origination fees and a lack of repayment options. Private lenders have targeted low-income borrowers with some of the riskiest, highest-cost loans. In many respects, private student loans are just like credit cards, except, unlike credit card debt, private student loan debt can never be discharged in bankruptcy. In 2005, Congress changed the bankruptcy laws. I want to make a point here. I voted against it. Congress changed the bankruptcy law and included a provision making private student loan debts non-dischargeable in bankruptcy except under the rarest of circumstances. I've never found one that has really qualified. That means that students are stuck with their loans for life. While the volume of private student loans is down from its peak just a few years ago, when it amounted to 26% of all student loans, private lending is still aggressively promoted by the for-profit college industry. The Project on Student Debt reports that 42% of for-profit college students had private loans in 2008. That's up from 12% just 5 years earlier, 12% to 42%. For-profit college students also graduate with more debt than their peers who graduate from public or private nonprofit colleges. Many for-profit colleges employ a business model that steers students into private student loans because of the 90-10 rule. For the record, private for-profit schools can only receive 90% of their revenue from the federal government. They're the closest darn thing to a federal agency you've ever seen, except they're making millions of dollars at the expense of the government and unsuspecting students and their families. So to find the 10% of non-federal money, private student loans. Get the students to sign up for 10% of their education in private student loans, even if they qualify for federal loans, which are a much better deal. The 90-10 rule that requires at least 10% of their revenue from non-federal student aid sources makes this an imperative for many for-profit schools. As a result, many students are encouraged to take out private loans when they're still eligible for federal loans, and even when the lenders know the students are going to default. Schools can comply with the 90-10 rule. Carrie Schaub contacted my office seeking relief from her student debt. She received a bachelor's in art from the International Academy of Design and Technology, a for-profit college. When she spoke to an admissions representative, she was enrolled almost immediately. Looking back, she says of the school, they take whoever's willing to pay. She was assured that she'd be able to obtain a position in her field that would help her pay off her student debt. Reflecting on her experience, she said, "I was young. I didn't understand how much I would owe or what the loans were. I trusted the school." After completing her BA program, she decided she would pursue a master's in her field. What she found out shocked her. No school would accept her degree. It was a worthless diploma. With no job, no future in her chosen field, she had $58,000 in debt. She decided to switch careers entirely so she'd be able to pay off her student loans. She currently attends Oakton Community College for nursing. She's unable to get a mortgage because of her old student loan debt of $58,000. Worse yet, her parents, trying to help her out, took out $19,000 in loans to help pay her tuition. Her parents are currently in Chapter 13 bankruptcy, but that loan won't be discharged. We need to begin now to address this looming student debt bomb crisis. We need to protect students and prevent more students from stepping into the same traps that have caught so many others. Today, Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa and I are introducing the Know Before You Owe Private Student Loan Act of 2012. Here's what it says. It requires the prospective borrower's school to confirm the student's enrollment status, the cost of attendance, and the estimated federal financial aid assistance before the private student loan is approved. Often, students haven't applied for federal student loans before they're asked to apply for private student loans, which are not nearly as generous or flexible. Requiring school certification also gives the schools the opportunity to make students aware of federal government student aid options. The bill requires schools to counsel the student about their options, tell them how the private student loan will affect those options, and what it's going to cost for them to repay these loans. Basics. In addition, schools will be required to inform students about the differences between federal and private student loans, and the differences are dramatic. This will give students time to weigh their options, make a choice, be informed. When students like Carrie contacted my office about their student loans, they often tell me they didn't know the difference between the two. It was just a student loan, Senator. Most go on to say that if they'd known, they would have thought more carefully about a private student loan and the debt they were incurring. For those students who decide to take out a private student loan, the bill requires lenders to provide the borrower with quarterly up-to-date information about their balance and interest owed. Finally, the bill requires lenders to report information to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau about how many students are taking out loans and what are the rates. There is very little information about private student loans currently available. More information will help Congress and the CFPB effectively inform consumers about these loans. This legislation is supported by a huge coalition of education, student, and consumer organizations. I want to thank Tom Harkin for his work on this bill, and especially all of the hard work he's put in on these for-profit colleges. Mr. President, it's finally dawning on a lot of members of Congress as they see programs like Frontline talking about the for-profit college industry, and as they meet these students who are going to these worthless for-profit colleges, students who are just stacking up the debt for a worthless diploma, that it's time for our federal government to step up. How can you blame a student or his family if they're going to a school where we, the federal government, are willing to offer Pell Grants and federal loans? What's a student to think? Well, if it's good enough for the federal government to loan money, it must be a good school. In fact, in many instances, in most instances, these for-profit schools are not good schools. They are not offering a good education. There are exceptions, but too many of them are just bad operations. We subsidize them. 90 to 95% of their revenue comes straight from the federal government. When they talk about freezing federal employees' salaries, we ought to freeze the employees at these for-profit schools. They're the closest thing to federal employees we have. 95% federal. You don't hear that from the other side of the aisle, but it's fact. And I want to also tell you this. This student loan debt bomb that we're facing, which I talked to Treasury Secretary Geithner about tomorrow, is going to explode on us just like the subprime mortgage market. Let me tell you how it's going to work. more and more students are going into default. They can't pay back these student loans. And they are going to face life decisions that will change their futures and the future of the American economy. We now have 40% of students who are making payments on their student loans. 40%. 60% are not. Some are still in school. I'll concede that point. But many of them just can't do it. We pile this debt on. We give them preferred treatment in the bankruptcy court so that the lenders can't have the debt discharged. And we sit there and watch as the lives of these young people deteriorate. This one young lady that testified at my hearing borrowed $80,000, $40,000 from the federal government, $40,000 private student loan, went to the Harrington School of Design in the suburbs of Chicago, and ended up with a worthless diploma. Worthless. It's 5 years later now. Her debt is no longer $80,000. It's $98,000. It just keeps going up. She pays $830 a month, and the private student loan debt is exploding right in front of her. She can't pay it. She doesn't know what she's going to do. She said, I'm going to have to give up the little home my husband and I just bought, and it looks pretty desperate for her. Her desperate situation affects her at the age of 32. 32. How do we let this happen? Don't we have an obligation as a government, as a people, to stop this exploitation of children and their families? That's what's going on. This bill I put in today is going to require these schools, all schools, to tell the students, first, you have federal loan eligibility left. It's 3.4%, not 18%. There's loan forgiveness if you become a nurse or a teacher. It's based on the amount of income you have later in life, what your repayment is going to be. If you get into trouble, you can have a delay in payment without watching your loan just stack up. These are basic things we build into the law to help students. Students and their families ought to know that. That's what this bill is about. I commend it to my colleagues. I hope you'll join Senator Harkin and me. I want to offer this on the floor. I want some colleagues here to go home and face this student loan issue and listen to the families they represent. We're hearing at our website. I invite students and families to come to my official website and tell their stories. As we learn what it's all about, we see the need to move on this and move quickly. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I rise today, along with my colleague, Senator Whitehouse, to pay tribute to Sergeant Dennis Weichel, a Rhode Islander who served in the Rhode Island National Guard. On March 22nd, Sergeant Weichel was in a convoy with his unit in Lagman Province, Afghanistan. Some children were in the road, and Sergeant Weichel and other troops got out to move the children to safety. Most of the children moved out of the way, but one little girl went back to the road. As an MRAP approached, Sergeant Weichel pulled her out of the vehicle's path, but in doing so, he was hit by the vehicle. He was medically evacuated to Jalalabad Medical Treatment Facility, where a surgical team worked to stabilize him. But tragically, he died from his injuries. Because of his heroic actions, the little girl he saved was unharmed in the accident, and he will be laid to rest this Monday in Rhode Island. A hero. Someone who exemplifies the qualities of the American soldier. Sacrifice, selfless sacrifice for others. Sergeant Weichel joined the National Guard in 2001. He was posthumously promoted to sergeant. He previously deployed to Iraq as a member of Detachment 2 Headquarters Company 3rd Battalion of the 172nd Infantry Mountain. In November 2011, he mobilized for deployment to Afghanistan with the 1st Battalion, 143rd Infantry Regiment. Each generation of Americans is called upon to protect and sustain our democracy. And there are no greater heroes than the men and women who have worn the uniform of our nation and who have sacrificed for our country to keep it safe and to keep it free. It is our duty to protect the freedom they sacrificed their lives for through our service, our citizenship. We must continue to keep their memories alive and honor their heroism, not simply by words, but by our deeds as citizens of this country. Today, our thoughts are with Sergeant Weichel's mother, Linda, his father Dennis, his brother Craig, his sisters Christine and Charlene, his children Nicholas and Hope and their mother Amanda, and his fiancée Ashley and their daughter Madison, and all of his family and friends and his comrades in arms. We join them in commemorating his sacrifice and honoring his example of selfless service, of love and of courage and of devotion to the soldiers he served with and the people of Afghanistan he was trying to help. Sergeant Weichel is one among many Rhode Islanders who have proven their loyalty, their integrity, and their personal courage by giving the last full measure of their lives in service to our country in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and elsewhere around the globe, and throughout the years. Today we honor his memory and all those who have served and sacrificed as he did. Sergeant Weichel joins a roll of honor that includes Rhode Islanders Specialist Dennis Poulin of the Army National Guard, Sergeant Michael Paranzino of the United States Army, Private First Class Kyle Kutu of the United States Marine Corps, Lieutenant Junior Grade Francis L. Toner, the 4th of the United States Navy, Petty Officer Third Class Ronald A. Gill, Jr. of the United States Coast Guard, Sergeant Michael R. Whiteman, United States Army, Sergeant Moses Jasmine, United States Army, Staff Sergeant Dale James Kelly, Jr., Army National Guard, Sergeant Brian R. St. Germain, United States Marine Corps, Sergeant Dennis J. Flanagan, United States Army, Second Lieutenant Matthew S. Kutu, United States Army, Lance Corporal Holly A. Charette, United States Marine Corps, Staff Sergeant Christopher S. Potts, Army National Guard, Lance Corporal John V. Van Geisen IV, United States Marine Corps, Captain Christopher S. Cash, United States Army, Lance Corporal Matthew K. Serio, United States Marine Corps, Master Sergeant Richard L. Ferguson, United States Army, Sergeant First Class Curtis Mancini, United States Army Reserve, Captain Matthew J. August, United States Army, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Sharon T. Stallforth, United States Army, Specialist Michael Andrade, Army National Guard, Sergeant Charles T. Caldwell, Army National Guard, Staff Sergeant Joseph Camara, Army National Guard, Sergeant Gregory A. Belanger, Army Reserve. All of these men and women have given their lives in the last decade in Afghanistan and Iraq. It is a role of honor. It is a role that Sergeant Weichel joins. It should be for us a role not just to recognize and to remember, but to recommit, to try in some small way to match their great sacrifice for this great nation. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, it is with great sadness, but also considerable pride, that I join Senator Reid today to honor the service of Dennis P. Weichel, Jr. of the Rhode Island National Guard, who died 1 week ago today while serving our country in Afghanistan. Dennis's actions in defense of the lives of vulnerable civilians embody the most noble spirit of service, sacrifice, and loyalty found in the hearts of the men and women serving our nation in uniform in the most dangerous corners of the globe. In particular, they reflect the spirit of service of the Rhode Island National Guard, which is the second most heavily deployed state guard in the country. Dennis, who was 29 years old, lived in Providence. He had joined the Rhode Island National Guard in 2001, and he deployed to Iraq in 2005 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom as a member of Company D, 3rd Battalion, 172nd Infantry Mountain Regiment. In November 2011, Dennis mobilized with Company C, 1st Battalion, 143rd Infantry Regiment, 56th Troop Command, to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. His unit deployed forward to Afghanistan just this month. He'd only been in Afghanistan a few weeks when his unit encountered a group of children on its way out of the Black Hills firing range in Laghman province. The children were scavenging in the road for brass shell casings, which are recyclable for money in Afghanistan. Dennis, a father of 3, hopped down from his vehicle to help move the children safely out of the path of the convoy of trucks and armored vehicles. As the heavy trucks rumbled past, it appears that a young Afghan girl darted back into the road to grab one last brass shell casing. Seeing one of his unit's mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles bearing down on the girl, Dennis reacted swiftly and selflessly, lifting the girl to safety and placing himself in the path of the 16-ton MRAP. I'm sure this was a parent's instinct, and that Dennis had in mind his own children, Nicholas, age 8, Hope, age 6, and baby Madison. Dennis was evacuated to the Jalalabad Medical Treatment Facility, and there he succumbed to his injuries. Dennis leaves behind his fiancée, Ashley, the mother of their 8-month-old baby girl, Madison. He leaves behind his former wife, Amanda, who is mother to his son, Nicholas, and to his daughter, Hope. He leaves behind his mother and father, Linda Reynolds and Dennis Weichel, Sr. My deepest and heartfelt sorrows and prayers go out to all of Dennis's family and to his friends. Senator Reid and I will join them this weekend to pay our respects when Dennis comes home for the last time to Rhode Island. Dennis acted with instinctive bravery on that road in Laghman province. His action reflected the selfless dedication of an American soldier and the heart of a father toward a child. Dennis has been posthumously promoted from the rank of specialist to sergeant, and his family will receive the Bronze Star he has been awarded for heroism. The writer Joseph Campbell once described a hero as someone who's given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. In giving his life to save one small child, Sergeant Dennis Weichel has reflected great honor upon our military and its best traditions, and this great nation and the values for which it stands. He will justly be remembered a hero. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
unanimous consent that the quorum call that we are in be lifted.